In the wake of Team Liquid's dramatic roster changes as the trade deadline closed in Week 7 of LCS, I've seen a lot of questions online from fans wondering why we didn't take the same approach to the trade deadline at Immortals. With Doublelift and Adrian, big names heading towards the Team Liquid roster, it feels like a lot of fans are disappointed that we didn't try and go down with that same strategy of just bringing in bigger and better names to replace some of the players on our roster and catapult us up into the standings so that we have a more secure shot at playoffs, maybe a chance of making it to the semifinals or finals. So I want to talk a little bit about why we didn't go down that same path of team building that Team Liquid did. And in order to understand why we didn't do that, it's also really important to understand why a team like Team Liquid would do that. Why so late in the season would a roster want to shake up so dramatically? Why would Team Liquid want to change out members so close to the end of the LCS split? And I think what a lot of fans don't see on a day-to-day basis is the impact that losing has on the mentality of an LCS team. And this has happened since the beginning of LCS. A lot of the times when fans question why a roster kind of underperforms relative to the sum of its parts, why a roster with tons of big name players and great role players doesn't perform as well as they think it should, you can look at what happens when that team starts losing as a key reason why. That spiraling that happens when a team starts losing can be completely destructive to a team's morale, the team's environment, the bonds between teammates. Often, players will start to lose trust in each other when they begin to lose games, and once you've lost trust in your teammates, it's almost impossible to build it back up again. And this happens even when players know that there is a longer time frame that they're working along. Easiest example of this is during our preparation for IEM Gyeonggi back in December. We were boot camping in Korea with an entirely new roster. We knew that we were there to learn. The players knew that we were there to learn. Winning is a nice side effect, but the core of why we were there was to grow together as a roster, not necessarily to take home a trophy. But despite all being on the same page intellectually, losing in scrims, losing on stage still took an emotional toll on the players. And this same situation goes for pretty much every team of professional League of Legends players out there. When you start losing as a team, it's really hard to pull yourself out of that nosedive. And so a team like Team Liquid, sitting at only 2 wins in Week 7, saw the need to dramatically shake things up, to wake the team up from this negative mentality that they may have entered into, and they did that by making some pretty drastic changes. So why didn't we do that? We've had a few bad weeks across LCS. We're not sitting at a record that the players, the staff, or the organization are particularly happy with. But I think the core reason why we didn't take the same type of steps that Team Liquid did was what I saw from the team after their really disappointing Week 6 in LCS, where we lost to both Team Liquid and Envy, the last placed teams in LCS, an 0-2 week against that caliber of team. That's enough to almost single-handedly send a team on a downward spiral. But what I saw from our players after that really disappointing week wasn't a spiral. I saw a team that took their lumps, that recognized the mistakes they made and took accountability for them, and then picked themselves back up on the next day of scrims to go back to work even harder than before. I saw players that took responsibility for their fair share of the mistakes in those series, and that in the next week rededicated themselves to scrims and showed up significantly better on stage against FlyQuest and TSM in Week 7. It's that type of attitude, not being willing to take losses lying down, but instead getting back up to work even harder after losses. That's how we picked a lot of the players for this roster in the first place. We picked players that hated losing so much that even a bad streak isn't enough to dissuade them from working hard, from doing what it takes to win the next week. Nobody remembers who's first placed in the power rankings before the season starts. Everybody remembers who lifts the trophy. And even though we might not lift the trophy this split, even though we might not lift the trophy next split, we're laying the building blocks now for the future of IMT. Not just spring 2017, but far beyond.